Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Power BI DevCamp Session 16, using the Power BI Export API to generate PDF and image files. We're here today with Ted Pattison, the Principal Program Manager from the Power BI Customer Advisory Team. Good morning, Ted. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Well, today we're going to look at the Power BI Export API, and we're going to talk about generating, PDF and image files. So thank you for everyone who's here at the live event. Thank you for everyone who's kind of watching the recording after the live event. Note that we do these sessions once a month with Power BI DevCamp. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly kind of move over to the portal. And notice that at the portal, we have different sessions, so this is session 16. And if you want the PowerPoint slides for this, just simply click right here, and these slides will download for you. Likewise, there's two different samples that I'm going to be showing today. There's the PowerPoint slides if you want them. And the two different things that we're going to be showing today, is one, a simple C# console application called ExportReportToFile. And because I'm showing code, I want you to kind of have the code. And then at the very end, we're going to look at another sample. And what I wanted to do here in the slides is just make sure that you have, links to both of those, because after the fact, you want to go back and look at the code. You're going to be able to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start up. So what we want to look at is how do we export the reports that we've built and start building PDFs, TIFF files, Excel workbook files, things like that. So let's kind of start by looking at the different types of output. Okay, you have Power BI reports and you have Pagenet reports. Which one supports more outputs? Obviously the Pagenet report. And one of the things that I want to start everyone to think about is that if you're building content out for Power BI, several years back, it was just all about Power BI Desktop and building the reports in Power BI Desktop. But what we're finding is that there are more and more scenarios where a Paginator report, is a better choice. So I'll make a blanket statement is if you are trying to, claim that you are a Power BI content builder professional, you can't say you don't know how to build Paginator reports. So I think we're going to see more and more people that will use Power BI Desktop when we need to use Power BI Report Builder. Because there's lots of scenarios, where a Paginate report is a better choice. And what we don't want is we don't want people picking Power BI reports over Paginate reports because they don't know or they're afraid to go down that road. Okay, now, we're not going to have a session in building Power BI reports, but to build a Power BI report, obviously, we have this tool, Power BI Desktop. We can build reports that have multiple pages. Have a very simple report that we're going to look at today. And the idea is, after you have, built the report, we can go to Power BI Desktop, and generally, you can get a pretty good idea what the report looks like in Power BI Desktop, but you really need to publish to the service, and see what the report looks like there. And since this is all about exporting, if we didn't need to write code, you can simply export, this report to a PDF file or a PowerPoint file. Okay, now what I want to do is to kind of cover some of the things that might make the Power BI Desktop approach not be so great. So what's great about Power BI reports, well, especially when we compare them to Paginate reports, is they give us much better interactive behavior. Now, when we export a Power BI report, we have something in the cloud that just is able to capture images as a screenshot. And so what's important to note is that it can only capture what you can see. Okay, so let's go with a retro acronym. How many people know what WYSIWYG means? Okay, when I was building applications back in the 90s, and obviously I mean the 1890s, we use the term what you see is what you get. So the idea here is, let's go back and, let's look at this particular report. And if you have a case, where just for, quick measure, I'll go down here. If you can't see everything in front of you, you're not going to be able to see what you can't see now when you export the report. So once again, in order to really be able to export Power BI reports, you have to make them self-contained, on a page-by-page basis. So the export process just can't handle a table or a matrix or any other things with scroll bars, where the data elements, or the data is not seen on the screen. Okay, so enter Paginator Reports. And if you haven't gone, down the road of starting to build these, especially when we get to the topic of exporting, it's going to be important. So this might be a strange environment if you've never used it before, but the idea is that, we're going to be able to run a reports generator here. And, as we build the report, it's going to give us the ability to have a banded report writer. So we have totals and subtotals and subtotals inside there. And, the other thing that we really get, as we kind of create these type of reports, is something that looks good, what we think of as the printed page. Maybe we don't think so much of the printed page before, as much as we used to do, but we think of PDF files, which basically need printed pages. So the idea is that, as you have these pages down here, and then we go back and say, what does this look like, when I print it or when I export to PDF, and being able to kind of get to the, ability, to kind of have, here at the bottom of the report, having whether it's published dates or page numbers inside there, that's the obvious big benefit, that Pagenet reports are going to give you over Power BI reports. Okay, so I've told you to go learn Pagenet reports if you don't know them. Okay, how mean can I be? But now what I want to do is point out that our team within Microsoft, has published a really great video series. And so, I wanted to put the link right there, but there's 25 individual lessons. It's got one of our highly articulate technical professionals, Peter Myers, and Paginated Bear, go through this. So once again, I don't want to dwell on this topic, but to really get exporting down, you're going to often have to build Paginated reports to meet the requirements that you want. Okay, we're just about to get in the code. One more thing I want to point out is that we're going to start exporting to different file formats. And there are controls at the tenant level for the Power BI administrator to say, nah, I don't want you to be able to export to CVS, CSV, or PPTX. So you have to make sure that at the tenant level, these settings are enabled. Okay, now there are going to be 3 different API calls, that we're going to make. And the first one is export to file and group. Now, one more thing I want to point out here, let's go back and, we have great documentation, for our REST API, so it's export file to group, so I'll kind of point you to this documentation. Now, let's go back here. But it turns out that export to file and group is one of 3 methods you have to call. So when you call export to file and group, it basically kicks off a export job and it returns back to you an export object that shows you the status of not started. But the idea is that you have an export ID. So now you can call get export to file status in group. You got to love these API names. And when you call that, you pass the export API to basically get an update on the status of the current export job. Now, the status property is going to have not started or running. And both of those mean it's not done yet. And then what we generally want is to see the succeeded status. And there's also a failed status. Now, the export object is also going to give me some other interesting information. It gives me % complete, so I can tell, are we halfway done yet? It gives me the report name, because as you pass in a report ID, that's not a friendly name, but it also tracks, what was the name of the thing that we're printing. You have the resource location. The resource location is kind of an interesting aspect because when a job ends, they make that export image file available at a URL endpoint, and you're able to pull it down. And it stays there for 24 hours. It's absolutely not made available through anonymous access. You need the exact same access token, to download the file, as to start the job. And then the last thing I want to point out is you have the resource file extension, which will come back as .pdf or .xlsx or .csv. Okay. Now, the idea is that you call the first method to start the job, and then you call get export to file status, one or more times until you get back a status of successful, and then you call get file of export to file and group. Okay, sounds good. Let's look at that in a little bit more visual way. So your code is on the left, and my code's in a simple C# application that I'm going to show. But your code could be in an Azure function. It could be, in some cloud-based application. But the idea is when you call export to file and group, the workspace ID and the report ID, which identify a specific report, are in the URL. And then in the body, we have a piece of JSON that says what's the format and any other, things about starting this job. Now, when you do that, it starts an async job, but the job is started. So now this reminds us of, if we're parents and we're driving our children to their grandfather's house and it's 4 hours away, when do they start saying, are we there yet? Typically 3 minutes into the talk. So the idea is once you start a job, you can keep saying, are we there yet? Calling this get export to file status. And what we're going to see, is that we can look at the status, and the status might say we're still running, which means come back later. But the idea is at some point, this export job will end. And then as it's done, the next time, that you call inside there, what we're going to see, is a succeeded. Other things I'll point out, is here's the report name, here is the file extension inside there. There's some good information inside. And then they also give you the resource location. So in the final call is when we call get file of export, to file in group. Okay, now let's do this. Let's look at C# code that is going to give us the basic pattern for exporting a report. And remember, the idea is that when you call export to file in group, it starts a job, but now you've got a poll to figure out, when it's done. So step number one is we'll create an export resource request object. And in this case, we'll just include the format. Next, we'll basically call export to file in group. We'll pass the workspace ID, the report ID, and that export report request. And we're going to capture the export ID. And the idea is that now where I'm in the are we there yet phase, we're going to call the get export to file status in group. And if you kind of look below here, one of the things that we're going to, look for here, hopefully, is, we have a succeeded flag. If we get a failed flag, there's no use in hanging out, inside of the loop either. So once we see one of those, we're going to drop out of the loop. And, as long as we're succeeded, now we're going to call get file of export to file in group. And that actually gives us a stream, allows us to kind of take and return. Now, there is this sample application that we are now going to look at. And so with this sample application, what I wanted to do, is basically give you some simple starter code and try to show you the capabilities. So here's an example of, I'm going to have some code that's going to call export Power BI report, and we're going to pass things such as the workspace ID, the report ID, what's the name of the file that I want to generate. Okay, and then I'm going to go back here, and what you're going to see is that, I have a whole bunch of code, and if you run this, it will generate about 20 different files, but right now, let's just say we want to, do it one time. So here, let's go back, and we're going to use Fiddler. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start this job. And, as we get Fiddler here, what you can see, is step number one, what reports do we have? Okay, now I find the report that I want. And so, our next step is to call this export to. And if we go back here and we kind of look at the JSON, that we pass inside, you can see that this request is for a PDF. Now, every couple seconds, we're going to call this, are we there yet method. And once again, if I go back here and we kind of take a look, right now we're in this loop and I'm waiting 10 seconds. If you're more or less patient, you can change that number. But the idea is that we're just going to kind of sit and wait here. And at some point, what we're going to see, status is still running. And now we come back here. Status is successful. This is the PDF file inside. And here's the call to kind of bring down that particular file. Yeah, and also what I wanted to do, to demonstrate this, is to go back, into this place where we're building all these files, just so we can kind of have a look at what we just built. So under exports, I'll take the one that was most recently built, and we'll open that up. And you can see that, here's my PDF file. It looks fine inside of Edge. Okay, maybe if I say, open with, and we start it up in Chrome, it kind of gives me a little bit better sense because of the PDF add-in I have, of what we're giving to users. So once again, we've kind of taken it from a Power BI thing, to a very universal file type that I can give to just about, any business user on the planet right here. Okay, now let's keep going. So the next thing that we're going to look at is drilling down on Power BI reports, and then we'll have a section drilling down on Paginator reports. Now, if all you include in the export report request object is the format, it doesn't really matter whether you point it towards a Power BI report or a Paginated report. But there are some, configuration details that differ. So we have two different objects that we can put inside the export report request. And the first one we're going to look at is the Power BI report export configuration object. Now, when you look at this code here, here's kind of if you're writing C# code with a Power BI.NET SDK, you can write the code that you see in front of you. If you're not using .NET, you can't use the Power BI.NET SDK. So you're going to have to figure out, what the request body JSON is going to look like. So I just kind of wanted to show that as well. Now, what you saw is that we can create PDF files. Great. We can also create PowerPoint slide decks. Let's say we go back here, and now we go back and, what does the slide deck look like? That's kind of pretty neat. So once again, I had a slide deck, or I had basically a couple things here, and it just kind of quickly turns into a presentation. If I come back here, this is not live. Once again, this is just an image, a screenshot, so no interactivity. For PowerPoint specifically, I know that we have communicated that we will have some other support for PowerPoint embedding that might be live, several months down the road. But when we're using the Export API, once again, it's just a image, that got added inside of this slide deck. Now, one other thing that we can do is we can say when I have a Paginator report, I want to build it as a PNG. Well, unlike a PDF file, a PNG file can't have multiple pages. It has to be one image. So what happens when you have a report and you say, I want to, basically export it as PNG? If it comes back as a single page, it will be returned as a PNG file. If you have two or more, they return a zip archive, with the pages inside. So just kind of be prepared for that if you don't know how many pages are in the report that you're exporting, you really don't know if you're going to get a .zip or a .jpeg file back. And once again, one of the neat things about calling the API is you get the status back, and once the file is ready, there is a property that tells you whether it's a .zip or a .png file. Okay, now let's keep going. Another thing that we can do, is we can add filter information, as I export a Power BI report. So the idea here is, let's go back and take a look at the files we have inside here. And so let's say that we decided to, build a couple of these reports, customer sales, so what's this going to be? This is going to be something where we want to add, what particular states we have, what calendar year that we're in. Okay. Now, if I run something that looks like this, what you can see, oh, sorry, that's a Paginated report. Should have jumped there already. But what I want to do here is let's kind of open up this right here. And what you could see is that if you have one report, you can export it with the filters for the West Coast. You can export it a second time with the filters from, the Central region, then for the East Coast. So you can just use a report as a template and just kind of put different filtering and basically, generate as many images as, you have filter combinations inside there. One little thing that was confusing to me here, and I just kind of want to point it out, is that when you set these, they're report level filters, and you have a list of filters. So you would think you would put multiple filters in multiple export filter objects, but we only support one filter. So basically you're going to have one filter string, and you're fine to use and or inside there. But you'll find that if you generate two export filter objects inside here, the API will not work correctly. Okay. Now, what else can we do? Let's say I wanted to export a report and I have name bookmarks. Well, that's easy to do. I just able to add that, into the request itself. Now, how do you get the name of the bookmark? This is one of those things where it's not the friendly name of the bookmark. So for instance, if I go back to this report right here, and let's go ahead and open the report, and now I come down here and say show bookmarks, it's not going to be this friendly name Western region. But the idea is that if you click here and then we kind of go up into the browser, what you're going to see is that there's this query string property with a very strange name of bookmark with. So that is the thing if you need to kind of find out what the name of a bookmark is. Okay, now you can export and pass a bookmark. You can also decide to export by one page. And as I look at this, note that there is this final section inside here. I'm going to get rid of this bookmark with, but you'll see here that at the very end, there is this part of the URL that is the page name. So once again, you can take page names and you can come down here and, while the page names are strange to look at, if you wanted to export a single page, you could hard code the page names inside. Okay. Other thing to note is that you can also export a single visual. Now, visual names are a lot harder to get. There's no Power BI REST API to get the names of the visuals. You can get them either by dissecting the PBX file, which isn't really supported, but you can do it. Or once you use embedding, you can use JavaScript, to basically query and get visual names then. We're going to revisit visual names a little bit later when we get to AppOwnsData embedding. But generally, if your application, is introducing commands in a visual, you can then have the user execute a command, and because you're running in the context of that visual, you can pick up the visual name. Okay, so we'll see some examples of that a little bit later. Okay, now just to close out on Power BI reports, well, there are limits. Now, I also want to call out that we have been using Gen 1, and everything I'm talking about with this export API, has been in preview, and in the next week or two, we're going to go from preview to GA. But it's been running in Gen 1, so we've had a lot of published constraints, that are no longer applicable. So what I'm going to cover is now Gen 2. By the time we get to 2022, everyone should be using Gen 2, and we won't have to really differentiate, between the two. But what we're able to do is export 50 report pages per minute per capacity. And the idea is if you have 10 reports and each one has 5 pages, you're basically, you've got 50 report pages there. Now, in Gen 1, we called out that there was a maximum of concurrent requests that you could put up. So there's no more maximum concurrent requests, but we do have, some queuing and some throttling in place. Now, let's call out some visuals are not supported. Our visuals, Powerapps, Python, Power Automate, and I just have to say, well, the Pagenet report visual, we're going to show a trick where this is going to become important. But if you just export a report that has a Pagenet report visual, that's not going to give you what you want. One thing I want to call out is that a lot of companies like to create custom visuals. And today, for your custom visual to be able to output into an exported file, it has to be certified. We know this is an issue. We're working to remove this limitation. Unfortunately, we haven't done that yet. And I will just tell you that, the idea that you have a custom visual that's not certified, the ability to have that output into an exported file will be available. I'm going to be a little bit vague, sometime in 2022, because I'm not the one who's pushing this thing out. Hopefully Q1 of next year. But once again, I just kind of wanted to call out, if you do it today, you're going to see just kind of a strange box where the custom visual is. Okay, now let's move to Paginator Reports. And when we do that, what we're going to see is that there is this other object, the Paginated Report Export Configuration Object. Now, the first thing to see is that there's a whole bunch of format settings, and it kind of comes down to kind of report settings. If you're familiar with Power BI Report Builder, you'll probably look at these and these will seem familiar. But if you want to set page height, page width, you want to set margins. If you don't want to print the whole page, you just want a page range, you're able to add those inside there and make your request. Now, we also have PDF, and Pagenet Reports, unlike Power BI Reports, have a second option where you can generate your Power BI report as an accessible PDF. You can compare the two. You'll see there are some differences, but if you have higher requirements for meeting accessibility, that is definitely a good option. Now, you might need to pass parameters, and once again, just like a Power BI report, where your report can be a template and you can export it 10 different times with 10 different filtering options. Well, we can do the same thing with Paginator Reports. With a Paginator report, let me go back to my Power BI report builder, and we'll go back to design, and we'll go back to state right here. So the idea is that when you're building this, you're able to create a particular parameter. Does it support multiple values? Yes, we want to filter by state. And then as you go and you start, building out your data set properties, I can look down, what are the filters? And we have a state filter implied. Now, so before we get into the coding aspect, let's say that we, go back here into Power BI, and then back here, we will open this up, and if we aren't using Power BI embedding, but we're just basically loading the report, inside the Power BI service, it's going to give the user kind of the option to, pick the parameter values they want. We are trying to address some issues to make Pagenet Reports load a little faster. But while that is moving ahead, here, what you can see is that if you've defined your Pagenet report with parameters, it's simple to pass them as you run an export job inside there. Okay, here you can kind of see that if a user is just kind of using the report, they're able to choose this. They're able to kind of view the report, which now is going to rerun the query again inside here. Okay, now another neat thing about Paginator Reports is kind of what I think of as more of a data format that you're exporting as opposed to a visual format. Okay, so for instance, we had that report. Let's go back and let's open the Paginator report, which has been exported, to an Excel file. So how handy would some of your users feel if they could export a report and then all of a sudden they're in their comfort zone? I'm in Excel, I've got my numbers, I can start doing what I want with them. So once again, to be able to export, to either Excel format, or to an XML format. Let's say I come back here, and here's the XML file that just got generated inside here. Once again, the data is available if someone wants to use it. Or likewise, if I go back here, and I look at the CSV file, we're going to kind of see the same thing, where it's just, a very simple data file that someone can consume. Once again, obviously, if you like this and you don't know Paginator Reports, time to start learning Paginator Reports. Okay, now, one thing that I found confusing and I want to spend a little time on is that when you export a Paginator report, we support several different image file formats, but you don't set the format property to that format. Instead, you set the format to image, as you can see in the slide right here. So let's say I wanted to create a TIFF file of this report. And so I come back up here, here is my TIFF file. What you can see, the TIFF file, is inside there. Now, you'll see that some things like PDF files, are really good things if you have a multi-page report. How about if I export, as a PNG? The important thing to see here, and let me go ahead and export it one more time, just with Paint, is that you have these image file formats. Back on the slide, what are they? EMF, BMPJ. They only print one page. So if you have a PDF output and you have a 10-page report, you're going to get a PDF with 10 pages. If you export as a JPEG or a PNG, you get basically a file that has page one. So if you want to kind of get down to that level, you'd have to say start at page one, end at page one, export as PNG, and then a second export job to do page two, and so on. Okay. So the image files are kind of useful, but once again, they don't give you all the pages at once. Now, we're going to kind of end the section just by kind of going through some of the limitations. So Paginated reports actually have better throughput than Power BI reports. Power BI reports are limited to 50 report pages per minute per capacity. Where Paginated reports are just limited to 50 reports, regardless of page count. Now, that's kind of the throttling. So if you had a 700-page report, you're not going to get 50 of those printed per minute. But that's kind of where the throttling is going to see that you can't have more than that. You can have really big reports and realize that, if your report takes a long time to load the data and a long time to generate pages, there is a 1 hour limitation just due to the access token only being alive for 1 hour. There is an issue with Pagenet reports that are bound to Power BI datasets, both in Power BI embedding and export. We don't yet provide support for service principals. We're working hard to do that, and we're hoping to have that by the end of this month, November. Okay. And also, you can export a Pagenet report with effective identity, but you have to use a user whose user principal name matches a user in the current Azure AD tenant. Okay. So now that we've done that, let me go over and see. Okay. You can see if there's questions. I don't see any questions here. I'll do one more section, but if you have questions here and you want to put it in the window.
Got a quick one for you from Anonymous. Do you run this as a standalone EXE from the command window?
Okay. I think that question came a bit ago, and it was probably about my C# application. So back here, this is the way that I've run it to kind of create some sample code. And the idea is, you just can run it, but, would you be able to run it as a console application, in your environment? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe you'd like to take this and turn it into PowerShell. So administrators could run these. You could put this code in a .NET server-side application. You could put this code into an Azure function. Certainly C#'s not the only language you could run in. So I'm mainly running it as a simple C# console application, just to give everyone, the simplest starting point to get this thing up and running. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Okay.
Thank you so much. I'll keep you posted in the next section if there are any new questions that pop up.
Super. Okay, now 2 more sections. The next one is going to be some deep developer stuff. Might be a little brain damage. I'm sorry in advance if that happens. And then the last section is where we're going to look into, exporting with Powerapps and Flow. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the developer sample. So here, what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of show an example of, let's go back. And now we're going to go to the second application, that I wanted to demo today. And it's a .NET Core application, that runs on the server, and then we have, code on the client that is written, inside of TypeScript. And kind of, what I wanted to kind of show, is some of these, I've called the playbook, but the idea is I want to embed a Power BI report. I kind of wanted to step through and show some of the different options inside there. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and run this. Now, what you're going to see here is that when this application starts up, I wanted to demonstrate, 3 different types of reports. And the first one is going to be the Power BI report. So we'll go ahead and click on that, and we'll add that in. And when the Power BI report kind of comes down here, we're also going to add some commands to be able to export this report as PDF, as PowerPoint, or as PNG. Or if someone goes to a particular page, we also have the export page options as well. Now, the way that this is going to work, let's go ahead and click on this. So right now, it's called to a web API. So the way that I put this architecture together is with a custom web entry point. Now, the other thing before I go into how the calls work is on the client, you have this issue where this user has gone to a particular page, and let's say the user now kind of picks a particular year, picks a filter, and now if I go ahead and click and I say please print this report, and I pass the workspace ID and the report ID, they have no idea what filtering the user is currently looking at. So when we're going to kind of take this user kind of on-demand request to export a file, we also need to kind of include the filtering information. And one very easy way to do that is by using custom bookmarks. Now, so down here, notice that if I'm running JavaScript code, behind a embedded report, I can say bookmarks manager capture. And that gives me this bookmark that has a state property. And that bookmark remembers all the current settings, inside of the browser. And so here, notice I can get the bookmark. I can also, if I want to print a particular page, I can get what is the active page, so I can get the page name. Okay, now, if we look back here, there's the first thing, that I printed out, and I didn't have any filtering. Okay, but now, I didn't mean to close the application. Let's try this one more time. So now what we want to do is let's go to a particular page. And, in this particular page, let's go to sales by city. Let's go ahead and, pick Florida and Georgia, Louisiana, Texas. Okay. And so now I want to go ahead and I want to output this in one of these formats. Now, again, what I'd like to do for this demo, is to kind of look behind the scenes, at what's happening. So what's going to happen here is that someone is going to click on the export as PDF. Okay, and we want to just print this one page, and we want to print it with the current filtering inside there. And so what you can see here is that we have this call, we have another call. So let's go back to the slides and kind of let me walk through what's happening at a high level. So you've embedded the report, and let's start with JavaScript that's running in the browser. Someone clicks on a button. And so your JavaScript code then can capture a bookmark and say, hey, this user wants PDF. And what's important here is that you cannot call directly from the browser to the Power BI REST API because we're using service principal. That's why AppOwnsData makes things, harder. So the idea is we need to introduce this custom web API. And then what happens is my client-side code posts to my web API. My web API then blocks while they do the work to get the report. So now the web API, is able to call into the Power REST API as service principal. It passes that bookmark, and ultimately it will create the export file. And while the client is still blocking, then we find out and we're able to take the exported file and return it here, and then return that back over here. And by the time, that process is over, hey, look at this. The user's got this one particular file. Let's go ahead and open that. And you can see, exactly what I had inside there. Now, going one step further. Okay, I seem to say that a lot. Let's say that what we'd like to do, now we just did export a single page and we kind of saw that work, but now what we'd like to do is allow users to export a single visual. Okay, this is something you can't do in the Power BI service. And just to kind of demonstrate that, let's say we go back here and we open the Power BI service, and I go to one of these visuals and there's this export data, is that going to give me an image? Absolutely not. That's just going to give me, basically a text file in CVS format with numbers in it. So what we'd like to do is to give a better experience. And so the way that we're going to do that, let's go ahead and start this up right here. And let's load in the Power BI report. And when the Power BI report gets loaded in, notice that down here, I go to this and, there is 3 custom menus items that I put inside here. Now, if we go back over here, here's kind of the report configuration object. And the idea is that I don't like some of the built-in commands like Spotlight, Export, and See Data. I'm going to hide those. I'm going to add my own commands inside. And, this is the way that, we get this effect. And then what's going to happen when someone clicks on one of these particular files right here? And, what you're going to see is that what would happen if someone kind of set the, the year inside here, and what is the region that we've set? We're going to want to make sure that this visual, when it gets exported, has those same settings. And you have to do extra work, to be able to get there. Now, a quick walkthrough is I have this command triggered right here. And the idea is that when the command gets triggered, this is going to run right here. And so some of the things that we are able to do, and let's say that I collapse to definitions, okay, well, I'm sorry, let me dig back inside here and find out the thing that I need. I'm sorry, there's export report. There's export report page. This is export report page visual. So the idea is that when a user comes down here, and says, I want to export this, to a PNG file, what my code is then going to do is, first of all, let's get the active page name. And, also what we're going to see is that the code that kind of handled the event. And down here, you have details, such as the name of the page and the name of the visual. Okay, so ultimately, we're going to have this request. And what's going to happen is I want to just print out the visual. And so what we send across the network to our web API, is going to be what's the type, what's the filtering. So this code actually looks at the slicers on the current page and will take any slicer filtering and simply pass that along. And the end result, is that I want to be able to export that particular visual to my user, have the user open it up and see that the image they've created is exactly like, the image that they exported on. Okay, so that was the painful part. So what you see in AppOwnsData embedding is that there's no toolbar to do a simple export. So you have to kind of create a fairly elaborate architecture, with a middle tier web API entry point, so that your JavaScript can call back to your entry point and the service principal can get the filtered information and do things. Okay, now let's look at an easier way to do that. And the idea is, let's say that instead of embedding these Power BI reports, what I would like to do is let's embed a Paginator report. I embed a Pagenet report, and once again, this is AppOwnsData. I'm doing everything with Service Principal. And one of the really neat things that we have here, is once this report finally loads in, we're going to have a export menu. And the idea is that in the last example, I had to work hard to give a user an experience where they could kind of export a report on demand. But now when you embed a Paginet report, there's the export menu. Users can just help themselves, to be able to, export, as PowerPoint, Word, whatever they need inside there. So I kind of find that, working with Paginet reports is going to give you a better output to begin with, but can also make things a lot easier in the sense that the export menu, is just kind of built in to the embedded experience for a Paginator report. Okay, so now that we have seen that, we're on to one more topic. Now, Thanksgiving's coming up here in the United States, and Thanksgiving, we always cook turkeys on Thanksgiving. But a couple decades ago, someone came up with this crazy idea called a turducken. What is a turducken? It is something where you have a bird inside of a bird inside of a bird. So on the outside, you have a turkey. The next level is the duck, and the third level is the chicken. And when I first heard about this, I thought it was preposterous. And then I went to a Thanksgiving where they had a turducken, and I fell in love. Just amazing. Okay, Ted, what does this have to do with Power BI? Let's go ahead and create our turducken. And the idea is that you can use Paginet reports, and we have this thing which is the Paginator Report visual. So on my Power BI report, I can put Paginet Report Visual 1. I can put Paginet Report Visual 2. And what's kind of neat about that is that if your Paginet reports are parameterized, we can add slicers on the Power BI report that pass filtering information via parameters to the Paginator report. Okay, maybe it's not quite three birds nested inside one another, but just to throw another element down here, Power BI reports and Paginator reports can both be built on the same Power BI datasets, that will make your performance much better. And once again, I need to call out that today, Power BI datasets, behind a Paginator report are problematic for service principals. Service principal cannot embed a report, a Paginet report based on a Power BI dataset or export one, but we're hopeful that that limitation, is going to end in the next week or two by the end of November. So then the idea that you're building, reports on top. Now, how is this going to work? Let's say that we go back to our application here, and inside my application, I have a turducken. And the idea is that, here is your Paginator report that's building in. And, let's say that, I decide I want to go ahead, and put some particular values inside there. It's going to take a second to load in, but what's nice with respect to the Paginator report that now is kind of embedded, inside the Power BI report is that you can just export the Paginator report by itself. And we're waiting for this guy to show. Come on. And we're waiting on you. It keeps going back to 168 and 200. Hopefully this will come out. But the idea is, when this thing finally shows here, I'm not sure why it's not showing. Let me go ahead and try it one more time, just with something simple. But the idea is that there's no code. There's the export menu. And if we've kind of passed filters, from the Power BI report into the Paginet report, and then we export the Paginet report, it's going to hold the filter settings inside there. Now, if I quickly open, this report right here, what you're going to see, as you build paginated reports, and then you take them and you embed them, inside of a Power BI report. Okay, as this loads in, maybe we'll go ahead and just remove this at first. So if I come back over here, here is the Paginated report. So the idea is that you have to have the Paginated report already in the Power BI service. Now we will, connect to that report inside there. Now, if you have parameters, so that has a name parameter. So then you're going to have to go and find a column in one of your tables. We're going to add it to the parameters list here. And now that you've done that, you're going to say set parameters. And what we should now be able to do, is kind of create a connection between the two. And as we do that, now we should be able to, make changes. And the final piece right here is that if I look at this Power BI report, notice that if you change the filtering, it's not going to automatically apply those filters. So in some cases, as long as it's not going to give you performance issues, having something where, the second someone changes, what the settings are, it basically reruns the query behind there. Okay. Now, I think we've kind of gotten down now where we just have one more section left. But kind of the moral of the story, is that in AppOwnsData embedding, it's a lot of work to give the users the ability to, export reports and report pages and visuals, but it's possible. If you move to Paginated Reports, users can just on demand, export things because of the built-in export menu. Now, we're going to finish off with one more gratuitous topic, and that's exporting reports using Powerapps. So for this, let's go back here to the browser. And so what I'm going to do is, let's say we go to Power Automate, and inside of Power Automate, what I want to do is I want to create a new flow. So let's say that I'm going to say, give me an instant cloud flow so I can just click on a button. So export this report. Okay, so here, we're going to add a new step. And I'm going to type in Power BI. And what we see is that in Flow, we have a lot of actions. And the two I want to point out are the export to file for Power BI reports and export to file for Paginator reports. So let's say I add one of these inside here. Now, in a simple case, it's going to show you your workspaces, and you can just kind of hard code, what we want printed out inside there. Okay. Also note that in a demo I'm going to show, you can also enter a custom value and kind of set these. But now that you have that, let's say we go down here, and now we'll have something like SharePoint create file. And if Ted could only spell, okay, so with SharePoint, what do we want here? We just want a create file. And so, what is the place that I want to push out to? That SharePoint site is going to be fine. I've created a document library for my exported reports, so we'll put that in there. What is the name of the file? My export.pdf, and what is the file contents? And we can simply go back to that. And what's kind of neat about this, let's go ahead and save this, is that when they created this action, they totally took away the complexity of an async API and you having to poll. That's kind of all done behind the scenes when you use this. So if I go back here and we say, let's manually test a flow, let's go ahead and continue. I have to prove those different connections inside there. Okay. And now our flow starts running. And what we can see here is that the flow starts running. I can see what kind of things that we were getting passed inside there. And in some amount of time, whether it's 10 seconds or 60 seconds, we should see this will, get to completion. And when that is the case, let's go back up, into SharePoint. Let's go to exported reports. And, as soon as this thing ends inside here, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to warm up. We're going to have, a new report. Okay, I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to wait for this to close, but I want to get through just a couple more slides. So what I want to show is a sample Canvas app that I built. And the idea is that it's going to use a custom connector. And there are Powerapps custom connectors and Power BI custom connectors. This is the Powerapps custom connector. But the idea here is, let's go back And I'm going to run this application to show you what it looks like. So we go ahead and run this application. And so what it's going to do, it's going to show the user, all the workspaces that that user has permissions to see. Well, let's say that there is this workspace, Power BI, DevCamp demos. I go there, and all of a sudden, there are the reports. So what we have here, is the ability to get the workspaces, get the reports, and each time we drill down on a particular workspace, we call get reports and groups so we can fill those up. Also note that my code can differentiate Paginator reports from Power BI reports. And if I click on one of these, note I can also drill down, and see individual pages. And now that gives me kind of this ability, to kind of create this infrastructure right here. Now, if I go back here, I can see my export just finished. But now what I want to show, and I know I'm about 2 minutes away from finishing, so I'm going to kind of go quickly here. But what I wanted to do is kind of demonstrate a Powerapps solution. And there's the Canvas app you're looking at. It has a custom connector, and then it also has a flow. And if I look at this flow right here, what you'll see is that this is a flow, that can be called from a Canvas app. And when this finally appears here, you can see that the Canvas app is going to pass workspace ID, report ID, export format, and page name. Now, here, you can also see we're doing things like export file for Power BI report. Now, the cool thing about this is, let's go and kind of look at the jobs that we have here. Okay, so now let's go back to our user, that's using the Canvas app. And this user decides, I really need that report as a PDF file. I need this as a PPT file. Notice that we're not waiting. And maybe individual pages, let's say for these, we want PNG files, for these inside here. So now if I go back here and we refresh, what you can see is I've just basically triggered a whole bunch of flows that are now all running, and I started them all. So a trick here, is that when you create a flow to call this, from Powerapps, what we're able to do, is basically make sure it's non-blocking. So we start this, and because we don't have to wait for the exported file to get back to the user and download in the browser, we're just storing these things, inside of SharePoint. And so for my proof of concept, every time we export, my flow is automatically going to figure out what the workspace name is. It's going to figure out what the date is, and then it's going to add the files inside here. And just think about, now that you've added these files inside, we've kind of made it so users, in SharePoint can get to that data pretty easily, whether it's Excel files, Word documents, PDF files, what have you. So once again, it kind of just shows you that two things I wanted to kind of show here. And one is creating this solution, where Flow has an export to file for Power BI report action and for Pagenet report action. So that can save a lot of complexity. And if all you want to do is have, a flow that runs once a day and exports a report to SharePoint, that would be something that would take 5 minutes to create. The Canvas app here, that kind of is able to show users workspaces, reports, and pages, and then it knows how to kind of pass the right, configuration data when we're exporting reports. It's also an example of that. Okay, so I just wanted to give a quick demo, and then I'll finish by doing a plug for next month. We're going to concentrate on working with Power BI APIs and Power Automate. So this sample had a custom connector, but next month we'll drill a lot more into using Power Automate to call Power BI APIs, and we'll kind of get into the admin API space. So for people who are managing Power BI environments, and you want to quickly see what are your unused artifacts, or what users have the ability to see this report, or this user, what reports can this user see? So all that's available through APIs, and all can be put into simple Canvas apps, with development, and that's going to be the focus, on our session next week. Okay, so with that, I'm now done with the content, and I think we should go through and see if there are any other questions.
Nothing in the chat, nothing in the Q&A.
Everyone who has attended the live session today, thank you. Anyone who's listened to the recording and got all the way through, once again, thank you. But looking forward to seeing you next month to come back and more Power BI Dev Camp drilling into Power BI working together with Power Automate.
And I just wanted to take a quick opportunity to thank you, Ted, for your always insightful sessions and your demos and sharing the knowledge with everyone. Make sure to check out the Power BI community at community.powerbi.com, as well as our Power BI YouTube channel, where you can find past Dev Camp sessions, as well as other things like Ted had mentioned, the Power BI Paginated Reports in a day and other things like that. So thanks so much, Ted, and I will see you next month.
So have a great day, everybody.